I'm really happy to say that I'm joined here today by Mark Burns. Hi Mark.
Hi Andy.
Thank you for coming in.
You're welcome.
Mark and I were just reminiscing about how and when we first met, and we were both shocked about how long ago it was. 16 years, 2008 is when we first met, when Mark joined British American Tobacco. And Mark has enjoyed a fantastic career before then and to this day, and has some great stories and experience that he's willing to share with our audience today. And I think there's a lot of value to be added, and lessons to be learned from Mark. So, Mark, thank you for joining. I gave a very brief intro, but I'd love to hear from you a bit more about your background.
Well, I'm from Glasgow in Scotland. Left after becoming a qualified accountant, and I joined Glaxo in 1989. I went through various finance roles, got to the high perch of finance director, and then a challenge around the merger with Glaxo and Wellcome arose. So the CFO wanted a process champion for finance, and for some reason I volunteered. Which then became an instrumental change in my career direction, because I then became the process champion not just for finance, but beyond. And I then became the Glaxo Wellcome lead during the merger process with SmithKline Beecham.
Right.
And that was the time when my transformation focus really took place. Still an accountant, still working for the CFO, but I then built the manufacturing ERP template. MERPs.
Yeah.
I didn't do the deployment. I then moved into the commercial area. And
SERPs.
This is SERPs, that's right.
Yeah.
And my main focus was to deploy that initially in Europe,
Right.
for European pharmaceuticals. It was 39 entities. So it wasn't something truly global, but it was European, but it was big. But the key focus was to give transformation. So we had 39 federated entities. You'll hear more about federation later. I'm going to talk about BAT. It was the same sort of journey. But the view there was to build a common backbone across Europe Pharma and really provide the person who became the chief executive, Andrew Whitty, Sir Andrew Whitty, the capability to manage his entity from a common base. So we drove the program on SAP, and we drove business change. It wasn't all about SAP. It was all about new ways of working and making sure that we gave the outcomes that Andrew aspired to. From that, we then were asked to focus on Japan. I had 2 wonderful years in Tokyo, dealing with a business transformation. We really had to get the business model right. So as managing Europe, I also went to Japan, and then we did SERPs. And then I got a phone call from a headhunter. That headhunter said, "I've got an adventure for you. It's one of your dreams to manage or build a single instance global SAP template." And I met Phil Coleman from BAT, and he offered me a role. And as part of that role, he said, "I want you to come in and do something to get me ready for that journey," which is build a data model. And at the time he told me, "Look, we've got a strong data model," which when I got there wasn't the case. So in 2008, 2010, I focused on the data model, and you helped me. Yeah, we come back to that later.
Yeah.
And then that started my venture into TAO, deploying TAO for 5 years, and then becoming the template owner, and then platform owner. And that journey finished 6 months ago. And I took the opportunity to say goodbye to BAT, and I'm now exploring.
Yeah, indeed. It's amazing how you've condensed what is an amazing career, so many milestones into such a short period. Full disclosure, I unfortunately wasn't the headhunter that moved you to BAT. No, that you were the one that got away, but let's move on from that, shall we? So, okay, look, I really appreciate that. And it's interesting, your background from an accountant into SAP, and something else you mentioned there, which I think we'll probably touch on a bit, that SAP isn't a technology program. It is, of course, but actually it's if the most successful SAP programs, in my experience, are driven by the business, or certainly deep collaboration with the business. Yeah. Do you find your accountancy background has helped you?
Yes, I think I've always found that finance allows you to touch everything. And a lot of the core processes, record to report, purchase to pay, order to cash, they've all got a strong finance element. And part of why I wanted to become an accountant was to have lots of variety.
Right.
Yeah, initially people view accountants as boring number crunchers. I didn't view it that way. And I was a management accountant, so I see myself connecting in factories, connecting in commercial entities, connecting in research areas. So that's why I think finance around transformation and SAP is so critical and fundamental.
What would you point to? I mean, you've talked about some already, but what would you point to as maybe your career highlights?
I think the deployment of the TAU platform, global single instance, supporting a business transformation, and that business transformation had target benefits. I'll be honest, when I joined and I got the story from Phil, I actually didn't think it was achievable, if I'm perfectly honest. We achieved the delivery in a record time. Yeah, it was a bit expensive. However, but the outcome was amazing. And what followed truly helped BAT to transform. And what happened in that transformation, it took 183 federated entities into a truly global model.
Yeah.
Common process level, 90% plus. Now, we drove it, and it was drove top down, chief exec, sponsorship across the management board, and the outcome we got was incredible. And the value and benefit was incredible.
Yeah.
And if I was to give anyone any advice about doing these projects in the future, get the leadership at the top.
Yeah, we're going to talk a bit more about that. We want to sort of deep dive into that experience. I want to focus a little bit on your career for a bit, because you've had a brilliant career. I know you're a very modest person, but you've really achieved a lot. What advice would you give to someone who's maybe starting out in the IT, and particularly in service delivery or enterprise? What advice would you give to them?
Be adventurous, have fun. I mean, truly have fun. Go beyond the boundaries that are set. Look beyond. Technology today is incredible. It's in an amazing position. Everyone's talking about AI, but before AI, there's many other things that were opportunities. Go for it as my guidance, and stretch the boundaries. And if you're someone in IT who wants to just sit in your bubble, you won't be successful. Get out there, connect with everyone in finance and manufacturing and sales and marketing and HR and procurement. Connect and utilise the technology available today to give value for the future. And if anyone does that, they'll have a massive, successful career.
Yeah, because knowing you as I do and your reputation, you've always struck me as someone who builds relationships. You're a relationship builder. Yes. And would you say, you touched on it there, so you say that's a big part of your success?
That's right. I mean, anyone who looks at technology just for themselves and wants to sit in the corner doesn't get the most value.
Right.
People who've got a technology base or a finance base and can connect with people and follow it through to give value, that's where success is. And that's where I've enjoyed most of my successes in my career. Yeah. That's where the pleasure has come from. Seeing something derive on an outcome that gives value and purpose. Yeah. And then to see benefit that flow from that gives you even more pleasure.
Yeah. Because over my time, I've seen IT move from, the guys in the basement with the keys on their belt and the short sleeve shirts to, to the boardroom. But, not everyone's made that transition. And I think the relationship, the stakeholder engagement, but the value add, that's the piece that people just often forget.
I agree. I've seen a lot of my service delivery teams quite happy to sit in the background. My view as a leader in this area is to bring them to the forefront. Now, not everyone was comfortable doing that. A lot of technology people are happy to utilise their intellect to maximise the value behind the scenes, and they are critical. I tried to make sure that people who were sitting in the back office came out into the front office and did the connection and started to show the value of what they could provide. Yeah. A number of times in my service delivery models whereby I've taken a unit and connected it with someone in the business and the relationship grew. The art of the possible started to become visible. And the number of commendations that I've had from people that fairly junior sitting in my back office, suddenly became superstars.
Right.
Every time the senior exec wanted to connect with technology, I now want to speak to that person.
Yeah, and that's validation, right? That's validation.
That's correct.
Mark, I'd love if you could share with people your thoughts around and your experience around best practice for service delivery. And obviously you're coming from an area where very complex, global, federated organization. So, huge, very, very complex landscape. Can you just share some experiences around that?
Yeah. Well, I started in GSK, in Glaxo, with a European team, which was initially based in the UK. So the lessons that I learned from that is what I applied to take it to a global scale. So within the team that I formed in the UK, the key thing is about the people within that and the relationships. And one of the key things I believe, which is critical for service delivery success, is to be scalable. Is to make sure that when the demand comes, you can respond the right way. And initially, my key focus was to build the right team with the right skill sets. And at that time, that was a GSK-based team. However, very quickly I recognised that team cannot do it on their own. So bringing in partners such as yourself, and then bringing in big players, the third-party SIs, they're fundamental. And forming a team and allowing that team to flex supply and demand. So very quickly I started to realise that the optimum size of that team was to have 20% of GSK people and 80% through third parties. I also discovered that it's not all about the big players. And this is where I met yourself, whereby I created what I called a 3-tier model. So the 2 tiers were basically GSK and third parties. And there was various parties in there. IBM was in there, Accenture, PwC. They were all in that mix. Glaxo really touched a lot of these partners. But there was a layer in the middle missing, which I classified as subject matter experts. And that's where I reached out to partners like yourself. And by combining these 3 tiers, it gave me the people who could then deliver against the demands. And then allowing to have a pipe which I could turn off or turn on based upon the demand really gave me a strong foundation to build from. I then utilised that to run the European team, mainly in the UK, but then take it to Japan, and then take it into manufacturing, and then take it potentially globally. However, the true test for that model was when I went to BAT, because BAT didn't have that, so I had to create it. The good news is there was a lot of key BAT resource available, and there was a lot of partners who were already established, of which you were one. And then we had probably every single big third party you could name. They were all there. So what I did was mould that together and get the right people in the right place. Now, the right place to run a global model, which is different maybe to what I had in Europe or what I had in the UK, is follow the sun. You have to follow the sun. Right? This planet is run 24/7, 365 days a year, and it's endless. So to deal with the approach that I had in GSK, I needed to create what I call centres of excellence, delivery centres of excellence, delivery focused on service across the globe. And clearly the day starts in Asia, followed through into Europe and into Americas. So getting 3 teams sitting across these zones is absolutely fundamental.
Okay, thank you for that. So you've talked a lot about your 3-tier model with your centres of excellence. What are the challenges when you're creating that structure?
Yeah, they have to talk to each other.
Right.
The biggest one is passing the baton. So whenever one shift finishes, the other one must pick up. Initially, and the obvious thing is when shift 1 finishes, they go home without talking to shift 2. Shift 2 then spends the next 2 or 3 hours wondering what's happened in shift 1. And similarly with shift 2 to shift 3, and then shift 3 to... So getting that circular connection is really key. Utilising toolkits to share the work programme. Communication's fundamental.
Which, by the way, today, like, that's just obvious. Oh, it's Teams, right? But we're talking, 15, 14 years ago. It wasn't, Teams wasn't around. It wasn't as easy as it is today.
Excel was that magic control facility.
Yeah.
I mean, there was tools we used to use, program management tools, project management tools, but Excel was always the base. The handoffs were all done through Excel, a little bit of Word and a little bit of email. But you're right, there was no strong foundation as we have today.
No. Okay, so communication is a big challenge. And what about in terms of the relationship with the partners? Because, the 20% internal, and by the way, it's music to my ears, of course, 20% internal, and then you're external. But clients often tell me about they sometimes feel like the tail's wagging the dog when they have a big SI partner there. They've got a lot of skin in the game. Yeah. How do you manage that? What's your advice there?
Yeah, my philosophy is that the big partner must not lead.
Right.
They're critical, but I've always driven all of my projects from either a GSK-based resource or a BAT-based resource. They always have to lead. I fully respect the big partner in terms of their thinking and the support they can give, but the leadership and ownership must reside internal. Why? It's because of the outcome that you're deriving. It needs to be focused on getting some value. To do that, the ownership must reside within the people who are driving that. Passing it across, I did one project in my career, and actually quite recently, where I tried to take some shortcuts in the pandemic. Couldn't put people on the ground, so I'll give it all to a third party and you take responsibility. That's my biggest failure in my career. My biggest failure. And I had to fix it by going back to my old model, which maybe later we'll touch on this. I spent 3.5 years in the US, really on the ground fixing it. So getting that ownership from the key leader, BAT, GSK, and then having the team below them. One of the things that I found, and maybe to name a partner group who works this model really well, is IBM. IBM slot in nicely to that. They are the one partner I found that they truly respected that model that I had. And rather than challenge it, they always supported it. And on numerous occasions, I would come to them quickly to say, I've got a project, we need to drive this forward. And they would say, well, who's the BAT lead? And in some cases, I would say, I will come to you later. And they would say, no. Your model is drive from within. We're very happy to support it. Therefore, we will not progress until you provide that BAT lead.
That's very interesting.
And something I took well. I used to do it with a smile on my face. But the value of driving things this way was always the basis of getting the right outcome.
Okay, so then you'd have in your 3-tier, you've got your internal team, who are driving and owning and leading, then obviously retaining IP, which is important. Then you've got your SI, and then of course, we had a lot of success, especially in TAO, which we're going to talk about later, with that SME. But we felt like there's a lot of SME. We were also doing a lot of backfill where you needed it across the business, some critical roles. And actually there was times when the SI didn't have the people, right? And actually we were there to plug the gaps as well.
The main driver for my model of SMEs was always to support, first and foremost, GSK and BAT staff. That was always the objective.
Right.
It was never about covering for the big partners. They don't need to be covered. But I always found that whenever you're doing a transformation project and it's complex, people get fearful. I remember when the CFO spoke to me in Glaxo Wellcome at the time, I want you to drive process for finance. And I said, well, any other volunteers? And he said, no, you're the only one.
You're the only volunteer.
The only one. And then when I started to build my team, there was no volunteers. Right. And the reality is there's a fear factor. It's complex. People don't want to step out of their normal day-to-day business. Stepping into this transformation is potential failure. Therefore, my career could be limited. This is where the subject matter experts come in, whereby they would supplement and support as a primary role the GSK and BAT people. And then over time, whenever there was gaps being derived, we would then maybe help out on the third party side. That tend to cause some problems. The big third parties don't like somebody crossing over into their boundary. And especially when a subject matter expert tells them, I'm better than you are. That never goes too well. But that's only something you do in an exceptional circumstance. The primary focus would be to support BAT and GSK type staff. The one thing I'd try and avoid is to do backfill. Right? The last thing you want to do is to bring a powerful SME who's basically backfilling for someone. That's not the right way forward. That doesn't sit within my 3-tier model. That's something that's separate.
Yeah.
You never provided that. You provided me key subject matter experts who really help support people in BAT and GSK.
Yeah, and we touched on this when we were catching up the other day. The reason you don't backfill is because you prefer the philosophy of, if that SME moves on to the project, you then recruit up or promote up to backfill. So you're keeping them, and then they can move back into the organisation.
That's the ideal.
And that's the ideal model.
Yes.
Okay, and that's locally, that's regionally, and then globally as well.
That's right.
Okay.
There's always challenges in that in terms of headcount restrictions, but that's the philosophy.
Yeah.
And only when you've exhausted that, you would then maybe look at putting a resource from your organisation in to support that backfill position.
Understood. So Mark, you and I worked together as we talked as partners at BAT on the TAO program. The TAO program still to this day, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the largest ever SAP transformations. Now, of course, it was more than an SAP transformation. It was a business transformation that used SAP, but maybe you could tell us a bit about it, please.
Yeah, so TAO, let's talk about the definition of TAO. So the O stands for One SAP, and the actual program started as One SAP. This is about creating a single instance to truly support the global organisation of BAT, which wasn't at the time, it was federated. However, when we did the business case, we realised that the starting point was a little bit more complex than we first understood. And this is where the T came from. That was a target operating model. It was recognised that the federated nature of all the entities, to just bring them all into the one SAP would have been chaotic. So therefore, there was a journey that commenced that started to focus on target operating model. And in that target operating model, we talked about ways of working. And we talked about 3 levels. One level would be truly drive globalization, which meant one process for all. And then the third option was allowing like a 50-50 type mix. So this went straight to the management board, massive focus on the T. The outcome was more towards going truly global. I'll be honest, I was surprised. I hadn't seen that level of drive in GSK before. And what I had received before was tough enough. To truly go for what was been outlined was tough. And this is what I said earlier, is it going to be achievable? This is going to be very, very difficult. So the journey was outlined as a 5-year programme with a focus of an investment, which ultimately just came over 1 billion. Sterling. Yeah, and probably about 60% of that was on the SAP type enablement, and the other 40% was business transformation. There's a lot of business transformation, because the business transformation where the value and benefit comes. So to give you a headline at the end, the benefit that was derived was massive. Right? Payback, not a problem. The benefits outcome for the organisations in the public domain, we drove massive change, and it was in billions. So level of success down the track was great, but at the time when we set out the journey, this is complex. One of the things that we sat down initially to say, and from a service delivery perspective, was how fast do we drive this programme? And we went for fast, fast, fast. So
because time equals money, right?
That's right. And then also the benefits that we needed, when we actually plotted it out, if you looked at maybe the pace that we wanted to go at, it could have been a 10, 12-year programme. Senior exec needed the benefits, needed the focus, needed the reposition of the company. So 5-year deployment group, and we put 5 units. So the view is basically 1 per year, and in each unit, it would be maybe 30 to 40 entities. There's some big entities in here, so they had to be managed very, very carefully. However, we started with a pilot, and against the target operating model and the one SAP template, we went to a pilot market. The effort we put up front to design, to drive the globalization, was absolutely critical. Everything was documented and shared, so the target process was there. So the markets that were coming in each of the deployment groups could see what was coming. So they knew what they had today and what the target process was. And then when we came to them as part of deployment groups, the first thing we did was a gap analysis. And there were some big gaps. And clearly, big entities that were federated would say, well, we're not changing. And in BAT, they were forced to change. And it was done through a disciplined approach. It wasn't like a bully type message. There was proper engagement, there was level of support given. Change management is absolutely fundamental. You have to support people. If you're asking somebody to change from A to B, they need to be guided through that and supported. And at the same time, you don't just do it once, you have to constantly update that. So the program of deployment finished in 2015, very successful. We cut a few corners and we enabled a process to manage that halfway through deployment, which was the Centre of Excellence, SAP Centre of Excellence, and the Business Process Centre of Excellence. So they would then catch things that were coming up and then prepare for what's coming in the future. So in 2016, 2017, there's a big focus on maximising the value. So we went back and fixed a few things. Yeah. And I was to guide anyone who's doing these types of programs, don't just do the deployment. Make sure you leave some time afterwards to go back and do some retrofitting, remediation. Label it as you do. In BAT, we didn't use these terms. We gave a positive spin on it. We went for business optimization. And we actually changed the name of our Business Process Centre of Excellence to BOC, Business Optimization Centre. And the focus there was for a process team and a data team to go back to the markets and factories and support them on the journey. So first thing you would say was, well, what's working well, what's not? And then we would then explore that. And then we made lots of changes. And then at the end of 2017, there was a number of acquisitions. So we thought, do we do DG6, maybe a DG7? We said, no, program's over. So we then put a new markets one. And then the integration of Reynolds America kicked in later. And that was the last big element that was added to the platform template structure. And that finished in 2022. And that journey, which started in 2008 with the data model, finished at the end of 2023. Yeah. And that was the point of my departure.
Yeah, so it was a 5-year program, but the work beforehand with the data model that led to it, the design, and then the planning, then the execution of the deployment, and then the optimization. I like that spin, the optimization afterwards, going back into the markets and driving value.
I believe ERP cycles are in the region of 12 to 18 years. Right. And it's driven by what happens with the software provider. Right. And when I did the strategy last year before I left BAT, the focus is in 2024 to 2038, aligned with the S4 provision from SAP. And in that time period, 12 to 18 years, there's a deployment, which is only one part, but the follow-on is critical. How you manage that platform, how you support the business, how you optimize it, how you get the value. That's why the cycle is much, much bigger than just 5 years deployment. Yeah.
So an amazing program and highly regarded as one of the most successful programs, especially given the size and complexity. Let's talk about some of the lessons learned. Let's ask this question. What would you have done differently?
See, I don't want to be cheeky here, but we applied a lot of them. Right. Because there was a cycle of do one.
Okay. Feedback.
Pause, learn, right. Go again. Okay. And that was a concept of the DGs. So it was never really a run them all back to back. Yeah. There's elements of, okay, certain people would be doing it that way, but the leadership focus was do DG1, apply the lessons learned into DG2, apply, and so on. At the end of the program, one of the things that we also learned was making sure that we had the right expertise in place in two critical areas. One is data and one is process. And when we created the data model at the start, the program focused on data migration, heavy focus on data migration. And one of the biggest learnings that we had was making sure the master data management team who was cycling it moving forward were always there. And even to this day, the master data management structure in BAT is first class. Similarly, in the process side, always look after your processes. So they're probably the two lessons that we learnt going through. Because clearly as a delivery-orientated person, my view is deliver, move on, deliver, move on. However, applying these lessons learnt was critical. Data and process were the two.
Right, very interesting. Okay, and create that feedback loop. You had the pilot, of course, as well, which you're learning a lot from. And then each deployment group, you're learning, refining, and taking that knowledge to the next. And with that, because you, if I remember rightly, the deployment groups were regionally based. Is that right?
Yes.
So how did you move that IP around? Is that do you keep that the global team? Do you keep that?
Yes. There's a balance of having global and local. Right. So clearly the whole global team all can't move. I mean, it was a big ship.
Yeah.
Some said an oil tanker, but you had to have the right balance of people going to each of the areas. And then you also had to have local people. And this is where the third parties really provided lots of value. They put key expertise into Germany, Australia, Canada, and it allowed the global team to really sit above, orchestrate, guide, and then have an impact when it was needed.
Yeah, yeah. To this day, a lot of our business comes from global implementations where they need a local resource, local IP. Because there's some of these markets they're challenging to find the right people.
That's right. Yeah, but it's also important to add that the markets that were being transformed, they had to participate. There was, just reflecting, a number of markets that said, well, it's been done globally, I'll just sit back. So part of our role was to not let that happen. So we had to make sure that everyone was engaged. And this is where I think the leadership from the top, from the management board, and GSK was the same. There was the right level of sponsorship. So when you went to a market, you said, like, no, this has been done to you. However, you must own it. And if they don't own it, you'll not be successful. And if you ask me in terms of some failures in the early parts of my career, I've done a number of projects where I told the markets what to do. It was mine, not theirs. They weren't successful. I always had to go back to them. So I learned that and applied it to make sure the ownership needs to be taken by the entity being transformed.
Yeah. I guess when the CEO, even for a company like BAT, £1 billion program's been signed off, you've got top cover. there's a lot on the table, right? Yes. So but we've talked about this before. So the top cover, then the local, because when you've got this big organisation, you need that top cover locally as well. Yeah, interesting. Okay. So despite the hype and I guess the impending end of support for non-HANA SAP, I think it's fair to say that the take-up and the migration of organisations to HANA hasn't been what SAP would have liked and what we would have maybe expected. What do you think some of the key reasons for that are?
I mean, talking to my peer group, so as part of the SAP user group, and people are struggling with the business case. A number of organisations are quite happy with what they've got with SAP. And with this change coming towards the end of 2027, they'd rather it wasn't there. However, there's a little bit of a catch-22 situation. I was part of one of the many multinationals talking to SAP about making sure their software wasn't just about upgrades, it was about business transformation. We asked SAP to basically set up what we call the clean core. And in fairness to them, they've done that. Right? We all said to SAP, why don't you have a solution which is a core, and then you build your customizations at the side? They've done that. And we spent not just BAT, not just GSK, but many other multinationals asking. SAP provided that. So now it's here. Unfortunately, the take-up is slow because people aren't ready for it. And there's a potential tsunami coming, not now, maybe towards the back end of 25, but definitely 26, 27. SAP will try and be supportive to allow an extension to 2030. But anyone who's really sees SAP as the backbone of their organisation, they need to upgrade within the time frame. They need to move. People are struggling in the business case.
So it feels like, we touched on this earlier, it feels like a classic case of this is becoming an IT project, not a business project. And we talked about how those projects often fail because if it hasn't got the business sponsorship. So that's interesting. We've heard a lot from our clients about the complexity around the contract, around the confusion around the product suite, where the ROI would come, what modules, what elements to implement, what not to. Have you got a view on that?
Yeah, we did the strategy in my last year before I left BAT. I found SAP were very supportive in aligning what we had, what the future capabilities were there, and then providing a value proposition, which then formed the basis of the draft business case. So SAP have responded from what we asked for. We've asked for solutions which are business transformation orientated. They provided that. I think the challenge that you're picking up is a lot of the challenges here with the deadline is coming through the technology area. And you don't want to drive this from a technology base. You want to drive it from a business transformation. And do you have a business case for that? No. That normally comes from finance, comes from chief exec, comes from manufacturing, comes from sales and marketing. So they have to be involved. And I think that's when I talk to my peer group, that's where most of the challenges are. They're actually busy doing other things. Throw in new technology, the AI, that's causing challenges in this space. So there's a bit of a underlying problem.
Yeah.
My guidance to everyone is you're going to have to put the energy and effort in now, as soon as possible, to define your path. And you might find that when you do that, there's not a critical path today, but there may be something out there that get prepared for this. And then also make sure it's transformation orientated. Don't drive this from a technology base.
Yeah, we're saying to a lot of our clients because we also recognise that there's going to be a rush as we get closer, and that means that there's going to be demand for resources. Yes. Resources are scarce already. They're going to be scarcer. They're going to be more expensive, and that's going to cause problems. That's going to cause slippage. Yeah. And I think the other thing actually, if we look at where we are in an economic cycle, just step back and where companies are in terms of their appetite for investment. We're seeing depression in Germany, which big manufacturing sector. The US has got the election coming up. That's frozen a bit. So it's kind of unfortunate where it's fallen in terms of the investment cycle as well. One of the other things that specifically we have a couple of clients who are in finance and payments, and there's a resistance about on-prem and cloud still. Have you spoken to anyone about that?
Yes. Yeah. Well, first of all, you don't have to go to cloud. On-premise is still a solution. If your clients want to stay on-prem, stay on-prem. However, the big hyperscalers with SAP are given what I call some amazing offers to go cloud. So therefore, if that sits within your key business objective, go down that path. But no one should feel as if they've been pressurised to go down the cloud route. If you are, don't do it. Stay on-prem. On-prem will work. It just means that what you've done for the last 5-10 years will apply for the next 10-15 years. There is value, I believe, to go to cloud. So I'm a supporter of going down this cloud path, and that's the journey that is set with BAT. But anyone who's feeling the pressure, don't feel as if they have to respond. Stay as you are.
That's good advice. So, okay, so we got to the point where you've managed to get business case signed off, the CFO's written the check, and we're going for this HANA transformation, S4 HANA transformation. Just talk us through, so we all know about Greenfield, it's been around, okay, and Brownfield, and now there's Bluefield. Just give us some insight. And are we expecting any more fields?
Well, there could be. I mean, there's 3 options, maybe 4. So let's do the 4th one, the simple one. There's a CFIN option that some people are looking at, progressing with CFIN, keeping the backbone of what they've got, running an ECC. They'll get pressure from SAP to upgrade, but the CFIN capability allows you to step forward, and BAT's done that. And it's a big step forward. The last 5 years, we've enabled CFIN with MDG Hub, with ETTP, with Treasury. Lots of the S4 products have been enabled already. That's something that people should consider.
Yeah, but I have heard some pushback about CFIN because they feel like they're going to do that, invest time and money, and then they're going to have to move.
That's right. And that's the reality, which then takes you to the big business case. Mm-hmm. The big business case gives you the 3 methods. So Brownfield really is a conversion. Taking what you've got today, converting it across, migrating the data, and then optimizing the process within that. And if the CIO's out there getting sort of pressure, that's the one that they want to focus on. That's the easy step, lowest cost, quickest to do.
Lowest risk.
Lowest risk, minimizing disruption. Yeah. There's a big downside, and it's all about reviewing what you have today. So if you have garbage today, you'll have garbage again in the future. Mm-hmm. So this is what you have to watch very carefully. So anyone who's looking at Brownfield needs to be very, very confident in what they have today. And I believe that there's major strength in what BAT has in their platform, which pushes them more towards Brownfield. So they can go down Brownfield. However, there's opportunities they want to take, which then takes you into that other category, which I'll come to in a second. So a couple of things which are critical for Brownfield. You must have an effective data model. You must have an effective data management structure. You have that there, then Brownfield's definitely something you can consider. You don't have that, I'm afraid you have to look at the other 2 options. Second thing is process management. Managing your processes the right way. If you've got that kind of engine of process optimization, and you can then see how you can carry that across, Brownfield's for you.
But if you wanted to go Brownfield to get over the hump, get onto S4 HANA, could you then do a remediation program, an optimization program after, when it's, and that could happen over a longer period of time?
That's right. And there's quite a few organizations have done that.
Yeah.
They are experiencing some problems.
Right.
It's all about being open and honest with yourself. Look at what you have today. Are you capable of doing Brownfield? You might get the short-term win, but the long-term pain is going to be there. And then when you do these types of transformations, when something's fundamentally broken, fix it in the transformation. Don't flick it across and fix it later. That just does not work. Right, so that's the thing you have to watch out. And a lot of my peer group I've spoken to have done Brownfield. They've flipped things across and wanted to fix another side, but suddenly looked at the heart of the solution. It wasn't possible. Right. So it's very, very complex to do.
Okay.
So then you jump to the other end of the scale. So Greenfield. Greenfield is basically starting afresh. That's big transformation. So it's really self-explanatory. People want to avoid doing that. Big business disruption, lots of resource, got a massive bill. Yeah, let's try and avoid that. But some entities will have to do that because what they have today doesn't function, and they have to really transform, and therefore they have to go down Greenfield. Where most organizations are now starting to fall is what's called the hybrid between Brownfield and Greenfield. And this is where the term Bluefield comes from. So it's a little bit of taking what you've got from the Brownfield and then doing specific optimization transformation. So you're selecting where the weaknesses are, you're fixing them, but at the same time, you've done the basis of your conversion. And this is where most of the attention is. People are now starting to look at the range of Bluefield.
Right.
So do you?
So the spectrum.
That's right. So a lot, what I'm picking up is a lot are falling into Bluefield. Ideally, you want to be as close left-hand side toward brown, whereas if you hedge towards the right-hand side, you're just as well as doing greenfield. These elements of assessments are critical for your business case.
Yeah.
Without that being fully defined, your business case cannot be properly generated. So if I was guiding anyone, we've done something in BAT, we spent the time looking at these three options, and then we've anchored, and then that will then form the basis of the detailed business case that's been built on right now.
Yeah. But again, it's a kind of bit of a cycle, because then you're looking at your from brown all the way to green, your business case, and of course then it's your bill, and again it's still IT coming and saying, hey, this is the business case, and that leads back to the first challenge you mentioned, which is creating a compelling business case.
Yeah, and I think the business case in big multinationals doesn't just sit within the IT area, right? I think everyone knows that has to go through the proper governance, presented based upon value to the management board, chief executive, CFO has got a massive role to play in this. So this needs a business case. This is not a technical upgrade. And there's a level of transformation. The products are different. SAP have responded. So again, I'll repeat what I've said earlier on. SAP have provided toolkits that give us a future proofing. They've not just done a technical upgrade. These products now are business transformation orientated. So anyone who's doing a business case without doing a level of business transformation is going to fail. So there has to be transformation orientation.
Yeah, and we touched on other aspects as well, like security. You can't have, if you're not updating and upgrading, getting your patches up to date. Yes, it's a huge risk potentially.
Yeah. The developments taking place in the package around the cyber security risk is fantastic. They're adding more and more dimensions. So I think SAP are responding the right way. I think the toolkits that we've used in the past for controls like GRC, looking at access controls, process controls, risk management, they've all been enhanced. And they are now in the next generation. So a lot of the call-outs that we've given, SAP have added them in. And they need to be responding because the people externally who are in the attack position, they're going to go after this area. So therefore, having the right defence in place is critical. And I think SAP are responding the right way with the right products.
Yeah. I really like that approach that you've taken, which is like, look, this has to happen. Let's find the positive in it. Let's find some of these tools that can be transformational to our organisation. Let's try to weave those in, present a solid business case, and hopefully you'll get a good outcome with good ROI.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I personally believe with the right effort and focus, there is value and benefit to be derived. Even with an organisation like BAT, is what I call fairly well enhanced in its process optimisation, there's still value and benefit. I look at things like order management, there's massive improvements, connecting SAP and Salesforce, there's value to be given there. This focus on consumers now, rather than just customers, the opportunities are vast. People just need to take them.
Mark, found this conversation really interesting. As I said, I've been looking forward to today. You're someone who I think has, I've got a lot of admiration for, a load of experience, and I'm sure the people who watch this will really benefit from you sharing it. Thank you for being so open.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you for the support you've given. Partnership is always very, very important. To me, it's the key success factor.